Thanks for staying with the Pulse. We continue with a reaction to the Finance Minister's medium-term budget. I'm joined by Tertia Jacobs. She's a Treasury economist with Investec. Tertia, good evening. Thanks for your time tonight. Very much top of mind for the Finance Minister is a strategy to avoid a fiscal crisis. That's how he set the framework for this budget. Do you see it as that, having gone through it?
Kathy, yes, I would agree with it. In the context of very low growth, meaningful revenue undershoot. Now, on the other side, a fairly big increase in the public sector wage bill that carries through over the forecast period. The government the National Treasury had to take big steps in trying to curtail the increase in spending, because otherwise the debt to GDP ratio would accelerate even more than what they predicted.
Let's talk about the budget reprioritizations and the adjustments that are going to need to be made, particularly, at a government spending level. How do you foresee those playing out in the remainder of the financial year? And it will undoubtedly have an impact going into next year's budget as well.
Absolutely. So I think, there were not a lot of detail in terms of where spending will be curtailed. We know that the net increase for this year is going to be about 10.3 billion rand, and government has tried to reduce spending over the medium-term economic framework by roughly 160 billion rand or so. I just want to flag here, there is actually massive crowding out taking place because the interest rate bill, the debt servicing cost bill, is the fastest growing item in the expenditure side. So, the impact of cutting back on goods and services, will impact, certain deliverables in the various government departments and provinces. But the minister in this context has focused a lot on the improvement in efficiencies, because there's a lot of wastage taking place. So how can you use what you've got better? So that's the first issue. They've also tried to protect spending in the labor-intensive sectors. So that would be your health, education, and police. But we have to see how all of this is going to play out, because, we're also struggling with capex investment, and there's always underspending. So it's very much a holding game. We see it every year, government trying to curtail, core spending because of, overruns in other areas like current, the public sector wage bill.
So
and
when
the interest rate bill.
So, Tertia, when do you think we're actually going to have clarity on that? And the reason why I ask is because a lot of people, of course, have been anticipating what these changes will mean at a government departmental level. You speak to some of the technocrats, the bureaucrats in government, and they've all said there are the key positions that they've had to freeze, or even sometimes programs that they've had to put on hold simply because they've been told no additional funding is going to be made available. So do you think that by the end of the year, there will be a change, a positive one, when it comes to decisions of that nature?
No, I don't think so, Kathy. The spending budget is also taking place in the context of an expected reconfiguration of the various spending areas, right? There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of departments that may not have to be there, that they can be merged. So we don't know exactly how much that could save off the bottom line. But I think, so there's a lot of focus on the spending side. But the problem actually also comes back to on the spending side, but on the capacity of the various departments also to deliver. But the bigger problem is this lack of growth, which leads to a shortfall in revenue receipts. So the growth dynamic has to attract more urgency. We know that, there is progress with Eskom, with a reduction in load shedding. Transnet is now the second one in line, right? So if you can get these infrastructure networks to start performing, that will have positive consequences for corporate income tax receipts and also, for job creation. So I think in the context while we're waiting for those reforms to kick in, right, we need the spending controls, because otherwise the fiscal position can deteriorate and that interest rate bill is going to accelerate. So the quicker we can get this GDP growth rate above 2%, because when you look at the GDP forecast over the MTEF period, it remains sub 1.5%. So your ability to maneuver in that context is not high at all. So Treasury has a very difficult, a very challenging hand of cards to maneuver between lack of growth, keeping South Africa from falling over a fiscal cliff, spending transfers, because you've also seen that there's going to be tax increase of about 15 billion rand next year. That would not have been necessary if the economy did not perform better. So it comes back to growth every single year.
Yeah, and I want us to touch on this issue of growth in a moment in terms of just what the budget has proposed, what the minister has proposed in this budget. There are two, however, big ticket items that I think we need to talk about. Big ticket not only because of what they cost, but really because of the impact that they have in society. They've decided to extend the COVID-19, the social relief of distress grant going into next year, and the Presidential Employment Initiative, that too has been extended for yet another year. What do you make of that?
I think that's the extending the social relief of distress grant. We did expect it. I think the important issue here is that it's still like a temporary increase where the whole social grant system will undergo an overhaul. So the government will not just look at the social relief of distress grant, but also at all the other grants that are available. And then we're likely to get more of a permanent increase going into February 25. The big issue for the SRD going into an election year is whether they will be either more beneficiaries or whether there will be an inflation-related increase, because that will also impact the bottom line. So I think a temporary increase makes sense from a fiscal perspective. But that is not pushed out to the following year. Sorry, and what was the second issue that you flagged?
The Presidential Employment Stimulus Program.
Yes. So what in the budget, that will also not be an additional spend. It will be rolled over, but that will be financed from the current employment program. So there's also not going to be a net increase. There will be a reprioritization. So it comes back to, we need to increase employment in the private sector. So all of these dynamics is holds while we're waiting for the growth dynamic.
Tertia, the minister has highlighted the issue of the energy transition, and really when we look at where a significant portion of our spending has been spending in terms of the borrowing that we're doing currently, this is from the Just Energy Transition. The World Bank, of course, also just confirming the loan that this country has been given. It's all geared towards this Just Energy Transition, and the minister has listed it as an opportunity for industrialization, an opportunity that can lock economic growth. Do you foresee that will in fact be the case? Is it one of those areas that we need to be looking into to possibly ignite this question of growth that you've been emphasizing?
That will certainly play a role. It's not going to be the only role, and the minister also said, that the review of the coal power stations have been completed. So probably in coming weeks or so, we will find out which coal power stations will be decommissioned and which ones can be improved. But the energy transition is critical. So I understand that in this month, we're also going to receive an implementation plan where we will receive more information about how we're going to proceed. But it's certainly a very big input in where we're going to.
Ultimately, I think a lot of South Africans who are watching this interview, Tertia, will want to know, it's November now. going into 2024, are things going to get better for us as South Africans? Is the state of the economy going to improve? Are our lives going to get better?
Kathy, that's such an important question. What I can perhaps say to encourage people and businesses is that number one is that load shedding should be less. So from that perspective, everyone will benefit. Sorry, I'm going to cough. Number two is Transnet is receiving attention, but that's not going to be a quick turnaround. We do think that interest rates may have peaked. I'm very sorry. That interest rates may have peaked. So inflation is likely to come lower, so disposable incomes can start to get better. Next year is going to be an election year, so there's going to be a lot of noise because it's going to be a very important election year for many parties. But I do think at the margin, when we have more electricity, when interest rates are no longer going to go up, that should be helpful.
All right, Tertia, apologies for that. Tertia Jacobs is a Treasury economist.